The Miami skyline shimmered under a relentless August sun, its glass towers reflecting heat and ambition in equal measure. But inside the federal courthouse on Flagler Street, the atmosphere was a pressure cooker, thick with humidity and the weight of unspoken vendettas. Judge Marshall Davis ruled this domain like a feudal lord, his black robes a shroud for a soul long rumored to be bought and sold. His contempt for conservative causes, especially anything tied to the Trump family, was legendary, whispered in legal circles from Palm Beach to the Keys. Today, though, he was about to face a reckoning he couldn't foresee, delivered by the unlikeliest of challengers, Barron Trump, the youngest son of a dynasty Davis despised. At 21, Barron cut an imposing figure, 6'7", lean but broad-shouldered, with a jawline carved from granite and eyes like Arctic ice, a gift from his mother, Melania. His blonde hair, swept back with a casual elegance, hinted at his father's flair, but his demeanor was his own, quiet, deliberate, a predator's patience in a young man's frame. He wasn't here as a political prop or a tabloid curiosity. He'd come as a witness in the trial of Elena Cortez, a Cuban-American entrepreneur whose nonprofit, the Freedom Horizon Initiative, had lifted Miami's poorest communities from despair. The prosecution accused her of embezzling millions, a charge Barron knew was a lie, because he'd seen the truth with his own eyes. The courtroom was a cauldron of anticipation as Barron stepped through the heavy oak doors. Reporters jostled in the gallery, their notebooks scribbling furiously. Locals packed the benches, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism. Davis sat high on his bench, his jowls quivering as he barked at a bailiff. "No cameras, no phones, no damn distractions. This is my court, not a reality show." His voice was a gravelly growl, honed by years of crushing dissent. He turned his glare on Barron, lips twisting into a sneer. "Well, well, the Trump princeling deigns to grace us. Tell me, boy, did your father send you to play knight in shining armor, or are you just slumming it before your next yacht party?" A ripple of gasps swept the gallery. Barron met Davis's gaze without a flicker of unease, his voice low and steady, cutting through the room like a blade through fog. "I'm here for Elena Cortez, Your Honor, for the truth she represents. That's all." "Truth?" Davis spat the word like venom, leaning forward until his knuckles whitened against the bench. "In this room, I'm the truth. You're a witness, not a crusader. Sit down and keep your trap shut until I call you, or I'll have you hauled out faster than you can say Mar-a-Lago." The defense attorney, Javier Ortiz, a wiry man with a boxer's tenacity and a scar across his brow from a street fight in Little Havana, rose to object. "Your Honor, Mr. Trump's testimony is vital to proving Ms. Cortez's—" "Vital?" Davis interrupted, slamming his gavel with a force that rattled the wood. "What's vital is keeping this trial from turning into a Trump family circus. Sit down, Ortiz, or I'll have you scrubbing cell block floors by sundown." Ortiz clenched his fists but sat, his eyes burning with defiance. Barron took his seat near the witness stand, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp, scanning the room like a chess player sizing up the board. Elena Cortez sat at the defense table, her petite frame rigid with tension. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun and a faint scar traced her left cheek. A mark from her escape from Cuba as a teenager, clinging to a raft under a moonless sky. Her nonprofit had built schools in Overtown, clinics in Alapata, and kitchens that fed families from Homestead to Hialeah. Now she faced ruin, accused of crimes she'd spent her life fighting against. The prosecution's case was a house of cards, murky bank records, a whistleblower with a rap sheet, and insinuations of greed. But Davis wielded his gavel like a sledgehammer, smashing every attempt to let the defense breathe. When Ortiz tried to introduce Cortez's financial ledgers, proof her donations went where they were promised, Davis cut him off. "Irrelevant," he bellowed, his voice a thunderclap. "I don't give a damn about your charity fairy tales. This is about tax evasion. Stick to it or I'll gag you myself." The gavel crashed again, a punctuation mark to his tyranny. The gallery shifted uneasily. An older woman in a faded sundress, her hands clutching a rosary, murmured a prayer in Spanish. A man in a worn Marlin's cap whispered to his neighbor, "This ain't justice, it's a lynching." Barron caught their eyes and gave a slight nod, a silent vow that he wouldn't let this stand. He'd walked the streets with Elena, seen the kids she'd pulled from gang life, the mothers she'd fed. He'd pored over her books late into the night at a diner off Biscayne Boulevard, coffee going cold as he traced every dollar. He knew she was clean, and he suspected Davis knew it too. The trial dragged on, Davis's bias a festering wound. He mocked Ortiz's every move, dismissed witnesses with a wave of his hand, and glared at Elena like she was a stain on his bench. But when Barron took the stand, the air shifted. Electric, dangerous. A storm breaking over a parched plain. He swore the oath with a steady hand, his voice ringing clear as he faced Davis head-on. "Your Honor," Barron began, "I've reviewed the Freedom Horizon Initiative's records. I was at their summit in Key Biscayne last spring. Every donation was tracked, every project funded. Elena Cortez didn't steal a dime." Davis leaned forward, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Oh, spare me," he sneered. "You think I care about some ritzy summit? This isn't your family's gold-plated boardroom, Trump. Sit down and stop wasting my time with your sob stories." Barron didn't sit. "With respect, Your Honor, those records prove—" "Prove nothing!" Davis roared, half standing as he slammed his gavel so hard the handle splintered. "They're inadmissible. You don't get to strut in here with your trust fund smirk and tell me how to run my court. I've buried bigger names than yours, boy. Don't test me." Ortiz leapt up. "Your Honor, those documents were submitted during discovery. There's no legal basis to exclude them." Davis's face flushed a violent red, veins pulsing in his neck. "You dare question me?" he screamed, his voice cracking with rage. "One more word, Ortiz, and you're in cuffs, and you, Trump." He jabbed a trembling finger at Barron. "You think your daddy's shadow scares me? I'll have you both in contempt faster than you can blink." The gallery erupted, a wave of shouts and gasps crashing against the walls. A woman in the back row stood, yelling, "Let him speak!" Davis whirled on her. "Silence! One more outburst, and I'll clear this room." His chest heaved, sweat dripping from his brow. Something was unraveling in him, a dam about to burst. Barron remained a statue amidst the chaos, his voice cutting through like a lighthouse in a squall. "Your Honor, if I may, the Key Biscayne Summit isn't just about Elena's work. It's about a meeting you attended, April 12th, off the books, with the Liberty Foundation." The name landed like a grenade. Davis froze, his gavel midair, his hand shaking so violently it nearly slipped. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled, but his voice wavered, a thread of fear stitching through his bravado. Barron reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photograph, holding it up for the room to see. Davis, unmistakable in a rumpled gray suit, shaking hands with a man in pinstripes under the glow of a chandelier. "This was taken that night," Barron said, his tone soft but lethal. "You met with Liberty Foundation reps, people tied to offshore accounts. Care to explain?" The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air from the room. Davis's face drained of color, then flared crimson. "That's a lie!" he shouted, slamming both fists on the bench. Papers flew, scattering like ash in a windstorm. "Fabricated! A Trump setup! You've got no proof!" Barron opened a folder, revealing a bank statement. "This says otherwise. Deposits to a Cayman account, your account, starting the day after that dinner. $50,000 a month, like clockwork." Davis lunged halfway across his bench, clawing for the papers. "Inadmissible," he screamed, his robes flapping like tattered wings. "I'll have you in cuffs for this, Trump. Guards, seize him." The bailiffs hesitated, their hands twitching near their belts. Davis's unraveling was a spectacle now, a man teetering on the edge of sanity. Ortiz stood again. "Your Honor, this is beyond outrageous. You can't dismiss evidence without—" "Silence!" Davis shrieked, hurling his splintered gavel across the room. It spun wildly, smashing into a water pitcher on the clerk's desk, sending glass and liquid exploding across the floor. The clerk, a young woman with wide eyes, yelped and ducked, her hands trembling as she clutched a stack of files. "I'm holding you all in contempt," Davis roared. "Guards, do your damn job." The bailiffs didn't budge. One, a grizzled man with a buzz cut and a faded marine tattoo, muttered, "This ain't right, Judge." Davis's eyes widened in betrayal, his breath ragged. Barron pressed on, relentless. Let's talk about the Morales case, Your Honor. A Hialeah baker, Juan Morales, lost his shop last year because you wouldn't let his donation records into evidence. The same week, $75,000 hit your account. Or the Diaz hearing. Sealed records, a quick ruling, another deposit. Pattern's clear, isn't it? Davis staggered back, clutching his bench for support. You can't prove that, he stammered, his voice a broken thing. It's a lie, a conspiracy. Then why, Barron said, pulling another document, do these phone logs show you calling a Liberty Foundation number the night before each ruling? And why does this security footage, he held up a USB drive, show you shredding evidence in your chambers at midnight? The gallery exploded. People leapt to their feet, shouting, weeping, praying. Elena Cortez covered her mouth, tears streaming down her scarred cheek as she watched Barron dismantle her tormentor. Davis reeled, his eyes darting to a thick envelope on his desk, one that hadn't been there at the session's start. He snatched it, stuffing it into his robes with shaking hands. "Guards!" he shrieked. "Arrest him! Take those papers, now!" The bailiff still didn't move. The Marine vet crossed his arms, his jaw set. "Not today, Judge." Barron's voice cut through again, calm as a blade. "There's more, Your Honor. The Lopez case. A single mom in Overtown, sued into bankruptcy because you buried her charity records. The same day, $100,000 from an untraceable source. Or the Rivera hearing, sealed after a late-night meeting with Liberty reps. You've been selling justice for years." Davis lunged across the bench, his fingers clawing for Barron's folder. "Give me those," he screamed, his robes tangling as he nearly fell. The Marine bailiff stepped forward, not to arrest Barron, but to grab Davis's arm. "You're done, sir," he said gruffly, pulling him back. "Let go," Davis thrashed, his voice a feral howl. "I'm the law here. Me. You can't touch me." A new voice sliced through the madness. "Oh, we can, and we will." The courtroom doors burst open and a dozen FBI agents stormed in, their black jackets stark against the chaos. The lead agent, a woman with a hawkish face and steel-gray hair, strode to the center aisle, her badge glinting under the lights. "Judge Marshall Davis, this court is now under federal investigation. Step down and place your hands behind your back." Davis stumbled back, his robes disheveled, his face a grotesque mask of rage and terror. "You can't do this!" he shrieked, backing toward his chambers. "I've got immunity. I've got friends, senators, governors. You'll pay for this." "We've paid enough," the agent replied, her tone ice cold. "We've got your bank records, your emails, your meetings with the Liberty Foundation, all of it. You're finished." Davis bolted for his chambers, tripping over a chair in his panic. The agents were on him in seconds, pinning him to the floor as he flailed like a trapped beast. "This is a setup," he screamed, spittle flying. "The Trumps did this. They've got you all fooled." Barron stepped forward, his shadow falling over the struggling judge. "No, Your Honor, you did this. Every bribe you took, every lie you told, every life you crushed, it's all yours. I just turned on the lights." Davis twisted, his eyes locking onto Barron's. "You think you're a hero?" he spat. "There's a dozen more like me, hundreds. You can't stop us." "Maybe not," Barron said quietly. "But I can stop you. And that's where it starts." The agents hauled Davis up, cuffs snapping around his wrists with a sharp clink. He thrashed, screaming, "The Foundation! They've got dirt on everyone. Politicians, judges, cops. If I go down, they'll bury you all." His voice echoed as they dragged him toward the doors, a desperate plea to a room that had turned its back. "Keep talking," the lead agent said, pausing to glance at him. "We've got plenty of tape." As Davis vanished into the hall, the courtroom erupted. Cheers, sobs, a tidal wave of relief and fury. Elena Cortez rushed to Barron, throwing her arms around him. "Gracias, gracias," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You gave me my life back." Barron shook his head, stepping back with a faint smile. "You earned it, Elena. I just made sure they listened." But the story didn't end there. As the agents sealed Davis's chambers, a new figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a cheap suit, his face pale and drawn, hovering near the prosecution table. It was the whistleblower, Carlos Vega, a former accountant for the initiative who'd claimed Elena skimmed funds. He approached Ortiz, his hands trembling. I need to talk," he stammered. "It wasn't her. It was me, and Davis." The room stilled. Ortiz's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying, Vega?" Carlos swallowed hard, glancing at the FBI agents. "Davis paid me to fake the books, said he'd wipe my record, gambling debts, petty theft, if I pinned it on Elena. The Liberty Foundation wanted her gone. She was too loud, too clean. I didn't know it'd go this far." The gallery gasped again, a fresh wave of shock rippling through. Barron turned to the agent. "You'll want to hear this." The agent nodded, signaling her team to cuff Vega. "Looks like we've got a 2-for-1 today." The aftermath was seismic. Davis's arrest cracked open a scandal that stretched from Miami to D.C., implicating a web of judges, lobbyists, and donors tied to the Liberty Foundation. Elena's case was dismissed within days, the new judge, a soft-spoken woman from Tampa, declaring the charges baseless after reviewing the evidence Davis had buried. Vega's confession led to raids across South Florida, unearthing files that named names, senators, CEOs, even a former governor. Barron stood on the courthouse steps a week later, the sun sinking into the horizon as reporters swarmed. "This wasn't about me," he told them, his voice steady over the clamor. "It was about people like Elena, people who fight for what's right, even when the system's rigged against them. That's America. That's what we defend." Inside, the clerk who'd cowered under Davis's threats sat with agents, her hands shaking as she handed over a hidden drive, recordings of Davis's rants, his orders to destroy evidence, his boasts about untouchability. "He thought he was invincible," she whispered. "But he forgot what justice means." In the weeks that followed, the Liberty Foundation collapsed, its leaders fleeing as warrants piled up. Barron returned to his life, quieter now, but no less resolute, knowing he'd struck a match in a dark room. Davis, stripped of his power, awaited trial in a cell that reeked of bleach and despair, his empire of corruption reduced to rubble. And in Miami's poorest corners, where Elena's work still thrived, people spoke of the day a young Trump walked into a lion's den and walked out with its head, not for glory, not for fame, but for something older,